Welcome to another episode of Monster Talk Live. My name is Matthew Baxter.
I'm Blake Smith.
I'm Karen Stolzner. Well, thank you for joining us. Last month when we spoke with everyone, we talked about psychics, and we said that for this episode, we would talk about psychic mediums.
And next time, psychic smalls. Getting the full.
Exactly.
We have a few psychic smalls in this episode. So
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we do. So I guess a quick definition. Psychics are people who claim to have the power of clairvoyance, to be able to see the past and the present and the future. And
I know what other people couldn't know. Not even
Exactly.
I could know. I amaze myself. If you saw last episode, you'll know what that is.
Yeah, that's an inside joke. So the difference between psychics and psychic mediums, and there will be some psychics who claim that they're mediums too, but mediums purport the ability to be able to talk to the dead. So, I mean, there's a long history of people claiming that they can do this, I think really popularized by the spiritualist movement. But I think for a very long time, people have claimed that they can do this. And there's an episode of Bullshit, I hope that we don't have to censor that, but where Penn Jillette talks about mediums, or has an episode, a very famous episode on that, where he says anyone can talk to the dead, but getting an answer, that's the hard part. So a lot of skeptics have said something along those lines. So, I mean, this has been a particular interest of mine, and I think I've seen lots of psychic mediums over the years, from Sylvia Brown through to some strange people in Australia that I think jumped on the bandwagon of this when it became popular, probably around the time of John Edward, when he got onto TV with Crossing Over. But I think we've all got lots to say on this topic, really. And we thought we'd start with talking about one character, one psychic medium by the name of Rebecca Rosen. And I'm trying to think about how I found out about her initially. I think it was someone who'd gone to see her and had been told lots of things and had a very emotional experience. She'd recorded the session that she had, and then she sent it to me because she said, the more I thought about it and listened to the recording, it seemed like a lot of the things she said were very vague, lots of generalizations. And I could tell that I'd been feeding her information that she was then feeding back to me. So I thought that was very insightful, because a lot of people are going
They
through
never
grief.
get that.
Well, no, but so that was really cool that she was able to see that in the recording. I mean, you don't always get recordings of these kinds of sessions either, so it can be really difficult to reflect on them. And sometimes you walk away from something like a psychic session and you connect the dots even more. So when you leave, you start putting two and two together and making connections that might not even exist. But so I think that, do you remember, Matt? Because this happens when I'd moved to Denver, and
Yes.
so someone had reached out and asked about her. I don't think I'd heard of her at that point, but we decided to go and attend one of her shows.
And it turns out that she's actually from Denver. So that made it even more interesting. In fact, I worked with a gentleman who was good friends with her husband, which I got some interesting information on that. And then from there, they got divorced, and I got a new job working at a production company called High Noon Entertainment. And
Since the marijuana laws, has that become higher news?
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that, because there was a gentleman that was really trying to push a show about, and I can't remember what the name of it was going to be, but he owned a couple of dispensaries around town under the name of Green Man. And
nice.
Lo and behold, as he's trying to get a show on with High Noon, guess who his new fiance is? Rebecca Rosen. So that was very psychic of you there, Blake.
That is freaky. Okay.
Yep.
So she did come into the office, and she really did act, I guess, to put it in our 6-year-old's phrasing, her poop did not stink. She was really high and mighty. throughout her visit to the office there. But
Okay.
but no, it was great that Karen and I. Oh, go ahead, Blake. You're going to.
I was going to say, obviously, I'm skeptical about people having the ability to communicate interactively with the dead, but if one were trying to create the impression that you had special powers, it feels like taking on that attitude of like being special and maybe austere or affectations of various types would be beneficial to the impression. And it's not just them. I mean, that's true for all. Even when you go in for like a job interview, you put on a different sort of approach, I think, typically than you would. I mean, in the perfect world, you wouldn't need to, but I think realistically, people really try to make that best first impression. And and this is a business, right? She's not doing this for free, right? I mean,
definitely not. Well, and that was an
Absolutely
interesting
not.
thing is when Karen and I were trying to figure out how we were going to get in to go see her because it was not cheap. Karen
and the dead might warn her that you're, skeptical.
Yeah,
exactly.
But they didn't. But Karen managed to get us in, and of course, let me share this. Now, the resolution on this is pretty terrible, but it doesn't matter because the point is that this demonstrates, if you can see that Rebecca Rosen knew exactly what ticket number you were and where you were sitting.
Oh, wow.
So she knew exactly beforehand where everyone was.
We had allocated seats, and I really do think that there was a lot of her magically being positioned in front of someone that she was about to give a reading to, or she'd just be in the right place at the right time. And it just seemed a little too much like it was a hot reading. So I guess we'll get into that in a minute. We did talk about last month, cold readings, which are, in a nutshell, generalizations.
And they're very integral to being a psychic medium.
Oh, yes. But yeah, you absolutely don't need to be psychic to have those kinds of skills. It's really common sense and being able to have the gift of the gab and being able to talk to people about anything. And then hot reading, which is basically cheating. And I think it was interesting. They've all got a kind of shtick, all of these psychic mediums. You turn up and they usually start with some kind of anecdote, some kind of story that really ropes you into believing them and going into your whole session believing that they have psychic abilities. And I wonder if you remember, Matt, how she turned up and she said that she just went, I think that morning, to have a haircut. And she found herself in a gift shop. And she started buying all of these things and she didn't understand the significance. And just all kinds of knickknacks and a birthday card and the number 99, all of these other things. And she went to her hairdressing appointment and just explained it to her stylist, what had just happened, how she just found herself in this shop buying these things. And the woman broke down and said, "This is obviously a message for me from my mother. She just passed and she was 99 years old. And all of the knickknacks and things that she'd purchased were somehow connected to her mother." And we really started the show with a bang, if you remember, just how,
you can see the
well
image
that went over.
Yeah, well, the image I'm sharing was related to that.
She did this a number of times throughout the show. She would just produce all of these gifts and knickknacks and things, and she'd be standing usually in front of someone that it would be connected to. So there was a lot of detailed things that she seemed to know. Matt, I wonder if you remember that she was standing in the room at one point and she said, I'm thinking about, who was it? Richard Gere. And I'm seeing Richard Gere, and this woman just leapt up out of her seat and said, "Wow, I have a photograph of myself with Cindy Crawford, who was the model that was married to Richard Gere." And she said, "I just posted this on Facebook a few days ago." So everyone in the room just thought, wow, this is amazing. This validation, as they call it, that she'd received this message. Whereas Matt and I looked at each other and thought, yeah, Facebook, she's using social media. She obviously has a list of all of the names of people who are attending and where they're located in the room. And of course, this is something that James Randi has spoken about. This is something that Banachek and other magicians and people who've been looking into this industry for decades have spoken about that it's a really common thing.
Yeah, I myself have used this multiple times. There was one talk I was giving at a library where I had just done a quick search on Facebook to see if my name had come up anywhere. And it did. Someone saying they're very excited to come see me speak at this library. So I looked up a bunch of stuff about her since I was on her Facebook page and got to see what she was talking about. So when it came time for the talk, I was like, oh, is there a, so-and-so here? And she was like, and I was like, your child, Aspen, who had just been to the dentist, and and she's looking terrified, that I'm nailing these things one right after another. And when I used to do this, I did go too far, but it was intentional that I went too far.
You're proving a point.
Yeah, because I started going down the list in order of how she was posting it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And it was until I finally got to her favorite yarn color that she was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So it was perfect. But also when I was doing the theatrical seances, I would do the same thing. I knew who was coming that night because they had already purchased tickets.
Yeah.
And so I could go on. Wait a minute. One of you's a real estate agent. Actually, it was like a lamplighter or real estate or something like that. So I was like, I'm seeing this lamp and all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, it has something to do with real estate. And then flips out, the spirits are talking to me here.
But she's bringing gifts and telling stuff she could have gotten off Facebook. I mean, come on, knickknacks, petty facts, give the dead a phone.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That was too much.
And that's the thing. I think that they avoid being too much. I think, Matt, you were just trying to prove a point, whereas I think with a lot of these psychics, if they just have one thing, people seem to be impressed with one seeming fact or something that seems specific. And I just wanted to make one point too. I've written about Rebecca Rosen a number of times and various columns and things like that. And I just came across a point that I'd made where at the start of the show, she announced the spirits brought you here and the spirits sat you where you needed to sit. So again, to me, that sounds like a kind of seat allocation thing.
An admission.
But I wonder if you remember, Matt, when she did her readings, she would, and this is a trick that has been written about by magicians like Ian Rowland, where you talk about things that seem specific, but they're not. So you could talk about a broken necklace. You could talk about maybe a shoebox that's filled with mementos and photographs and things like that.
Jewelry and shoeboxes full of mementos, things like that. Those are hot to use those. Not hot reading, but those are really hot properties to utilize.
And they relate. I mean, I'm sure all of us just sitting here now and the people who are watching this can think of times where there's been a broken necklace that's had some significance to a deceased loved one or something like that. But the thing that I found interesting is after the show, I went and did some research on YouTube and came across a bunch of videos where she was saying exactly the same things. I mean, she was talking about rainbows. She was talking about reincarnation, that
dolphins, butterflies.
Yes, your deceased loved ones might turn up as a fly that you find in your car, and you're trying to swap this fly away, and it turns out it's your deceased dad who's just trying to communicate with you. And
you've got like a mother-in-law who's a mosquito sucking the blood right out of you.
Well,
my house is full of the reincarnated, apparently, have been buzzing around. So
but I think it was interesting too. I mean, a trick or a technique that most psychic mediums seem to use is throwing out a letter. The spirits are showing me the letter S or the letter K.
But look at the picture that I'm sharing right now. You remember what that was, right?
I don't.
She had a list of names that she had written down.
Oh yes.
Do these mean anything, Mike? John.
I have this list here. Yep. So she said she read a list of the names of spirits who had been, and this is a quote from her, showing up all day long. They were in single file out the door. And I've got the list of actual names too, because we recorded part of this. And she just went through, here's some of the names, the spirits that had been trying to get through to her that day to communicate with their loved ones that evening. There was Joe and Robert or Bob and Dan and Jerry and Nick and Chris and Ben and Jesse and Corey and Catherine and Jim.
Does anybody know any of those names?
And
that's who
she
they're
did
here for
actually
you.
fail, though. She did fail sometimes. So even with a room of maybe 300 people, I think were there.
Yeah.
There was still
nobody knew a Bob.
Yeah.
Like just not coming
Bob.
up. No,
but
not ringing up.
she'd made a mistake at some point, and I can't remember. She came up with the letter G, and for some reason no one immediately reacted because there was no further information there. And
usually when you hit that G spot, there's some kind of reaction. It's very weird. Okay, so
oh dear.
We're live again, aren't we? We're live. Sorry.
Most people can't find it anyway, so
no
she is like, my wife's in the chat room saying it's like romper room. She's traumatizing me because they never Miss Sally never said my name. And I would like
she never in Australia the version where the mirror I'm seeing she saw everyone
where everybody was
Karen,
upside down, right?
Never saw Karen. Yeah, I think that was the problem. But anyway, to go back to Rebecca, she had seen the letter G, and then she said the letter R, and then she said George, and no one was buying it, so she changed GR to Grandpa.
Ooh.
And I've seen that with other psychics too, that B became BR, became brother, and that D became dad. I mean, just how pathetic is that?
It became BR became a break in HTML. I don't know what's going on here. It's like what a tangled web we weave.
Ian Rowland, we've mentioned him a couple of times. Wrote the Full Facts Book of Cold Reading. He once said to me that when you throw out all of these names, that the hard part would be trying to find a name that didn't work, because people really do make connections. They go into these places, not someone like me or like Matt who pay $100 to try and debunk these people. I mean, these are believers. You don't pay that kind of money. You don't attend these kinds of things unless you believe, and
you want it to work. You want it to be real.
And that's it. So we've talked before on the show about how, like, during some of the exorcism programs, like there are people who are just like repeat customers, right? Do psychics, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but in your experience, do psychics have groupies who like would just be like, you would already know stuff because they've come again and again to the shows?
Yes.
I think
that is true.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely true. There are people who have private readings too. Rebecca Rosen offers private readings, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, but at the end of the show, she said, if you want to have a private reading, I've got a 3-year waiting list. And this was for $500 for
and that's for the living
private reading,
right?
Yeah. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past.
We tried to get in on the that was before Sylvia passed over.
That's right. Yeah.
And the waiting list was longer than 2 years for the call line, right? So I believe
it was 8.
It was 8. I knew it was a long time. Yeah.
And I phoned to test this, and I phoned because I'd heard rumors that it would take 8 years to get to speak with her, to pay $800 for half an hour. And so I phoned and said, I'd like to get on the list. And they said, yes, there's an 8-year waiting list. And I said, oh, that's fine. Yeah. Maybe a few more people will pass that I can communicate with in the meantime.
She's almost through her backlog now. She's been dead for several years, and she's almost done. So.
Here was the interesting thing, and Blake, I don't know if you remember this, but I got a phone call 3 months later saying a spot has opened up, so you can now have your consultation with Sylvia. So I just think that is just part of that.
Well, you were also looking at whether they were pawning people off on other psychics as well. Like, didn't her son?
Like her son.
That's a good point. Yeah, his name's Chris Dufresne. That he was. I think she was a bit of a stage mother, and he wasn't really interested in taking over the psychic business,
family business.
But she was But she was trying to push him to do that, and he was, I think, maybe $500 instead of $800. So they were trying to push people off onto him, but I just thought this is really just kind of building up that tension and that expectation that there's such a long wait, and then this spot magically came up.
I'm sorry, this has to get paid off from the chat room. I'm seeing an Uncle Bob. Stephen, is there Stephen here that had an Uncle Bob that died? Okay. I just had to pay that off.
Okay.
I think
it's from the chat room. So
I was saying mathematically, the 8-year backlog joke really works because she died in 2013. So that's weirdly accurate. Am I psychic?
Yeah. Well, what wasn't psychic about that is she didn't have people pay in advance.
But if further to what Blake had asked, yes, certainly historically, before the days of social media, you had people who would go and continue to see the same psychic, or they would see other psychics, and that they would work together to create files, dossiers on clients, and to compile information about their love life and their career and their families, and then sell or share that information and use it amongst themselves. But it's certainly made a lot easier with the internet today. Blake seems to be shaking there, is he?
I know, he's so excited.
My whole desk seems to be vibrating. I assume that's the spirits at play. I don't know what's going on there. So
maybe we should do a show on exorcisms.
Or on camera stabilization, one of those two things. Sorry,
exorcisms would be more entertaining, I think.
If it makes you nauseous to watch my shaky video, it's probably also making you nauseous to watch it not shake. So it's all there's no, just keep a bucket ready.
Like the Blair Witch Project.
You were probably not a fan of that.
But further to what Blake was saying, it is amazing how they do have these egos and these attitudes, and it just seems to be part of their shtick. And you would think that they would be compassionate and loving people, this new age types, but often they're quite businesslike. And I remember with Rebecca Rosen at the start, she said that not everyone would end up getting a reading, that she had a few thousand spirits who were waiting there to be read, but she would only read the ones who needed to be read. And I've certainly left these kinds of gigs with people crying and who are desperate. And that pushes these people to go and get one of those very expensive private readings.
Well, and it's interesting as well when you've got someone who gets a reading that's really, really trivial. And then you got someone who didn't get a reading that was like, much more tragic. And there was information they needed to know.
Yeah.
And I had to choose the trivial one over you.
Exactly. And then they'll do a trivial reading, and it usually will end with something like, they send their love, or they're watching over you, and just this kind of this fluff.
And they're here with your dead ferret. Your dead ferret is fine, and she's being taken care of.
Well, to answer my wife from the chat room, I did want to say I do love her golden white dress. It's really pretty.
Okay, no context there, but I'm sure it is.
No. It's she'll know. It's just a beautiful golden white dress, and I think we can all agree that's what she's wearing. That's all. That's just slightly.
Yes.
Okay, yes. We all agree.
Yep.
So
it's what we do.
I think the show became progressively more interesting, and you can see her here. This is one of those times where she seemed to have an extra long pause in the midst of doing a reading, because she was receiving messages from her spirits. And so Matt was in the audience with me she didn't give a reading to us. I mean, I have deceased loved ones, and so does Matt. And neither of us had
deceased ones. I don't know if they're loved, but
but
might edit that out of this live show. But
I don't know how to make this. So I apologize for the shaky. If I even touch my desk, the camera just does this. Like,
okay.
It's like ah.
It's kind of spooky, really.
All right, but it's really not stable. I apologize. Sorry.
What are you touching your desk with?
I just anything bumps my desk. This thing's like it looks like I've got it on a whip antenna.
Well, okay, we've got enough information. That's fine.
So,
we'll move on.
Yeah. No, I'm just touching things, and things are moving. That's all.
Yeah, white and gold dress, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So psychics, mediums.
We took photographs of her throughout the night, and there are plenty of people doing that. But we examined the photographs afterwards, and we found something that we thought was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There she
George
is,
Lucas
reading to the audience. So what we
isn't that Teresa Caputo over there? Never mind. Yes.
So we came across this picture.
Ooh.
And it looks
her
like
ears
she's
pierced.
got. It looks like her ears are pierced, but I don't think she's wearing earrings.
I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
I think she's not wearing earrings because that might affect the little earpiece that appears to be there. in her
Suddenly her
ear.
reception starts picking up like airline chatter.
Yes. Yep. And so
she's got to keep the earrings out.
When she's receiving messages from the spirits, perhaps she's not receiving messages from the spirits, but receiving messages from someone more alive. And so this goes back to the whole Peter Popov thing. I mean, this kind of shtick has been around for decades. And James Randi and Banachek had exposed Peter Popov for wearing an earpiece at his performances and, receiving information from his wife about, and it was very specific information too. I just don't think that kind of thing would go down so much today. Now it's very vague, and they'll talk about illnesses, really common illnesses, cancer, lung disease, heart attacks, things like that. And they'll talk about names, but they won't provide too much information. And it seems like once they're on that high note, they'll kind of move on to someone else. But in the past, you had Peter Popov, who was feeding all kinds of really specific information about specific diseases that people had, specific addresses where they lived, their names, their middle names. I mean, everything. He was receiving all of this from God. And so again, this has been around for a long time, and it appears that she had some kind of earpiece, and we can't prove that, but she certainly did a really good job with what appeared to be a hot reading at various points with specific information. And it's our theory that she had an earpiece and she was receiving information from someone else. Now, Matt, you know a little bit more about this from your contact with her or her husband, ex-husband.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And that was an interesting sort of happening, that I would end up working with someone who was friends with her ex-husband, who did not deny that he was backstage on Facebook at the time. So he was able to, any fresh information that was out there, he was able to get and transmit to her. Now, like I said, he did not deny it. He did not admit it, but that's where we sit with that one.
It's a common trick. So it's a possibility that she was
absolutely
using an earpiece.
Yeah, in the chat, they're talking about the when James Randi's investigation happened with it was an open radio frequency, so they were using a police scanner to get to it. I would suspect, I don't know this for a fact, but I would suspect that most of that kind of stuff would be encrypted now, or behind some kind of, it would not be as easy to just use an open scanner and find these kind of communications.
So I just use an open camera lens to actually catch that one.
Yeah, no, that's a good approach.
But I mean, you can really see when things shift from cold reading to hot reading, because often they can't get more than a letter. Does someone here have a relative starts with a W? I mean, it starts with a letter and then it starts transforming, and then all of a sudden they're nailing details that, why didn't they just come out with that in the first place? So it's really weird to see the shift.
Well, as you said, she'd go from G, nothing, G-R, George, nothing, to then grandpa, your granddad. And then she would suddenly have
Social security number.
Yeah. Here's the last 3 residences that you lived at.
Right.
So it was really just very telling.
This dead relative, I think their name has been verified.
Yeah. But I've seen a lot of psychic mediums over the years. I mean, it was a fun opportunity to be able to go and see Sylvia Brown. I saw her in Salt Lake City, and that was really interesting to see her in a room full of Mormons doing readings. And
really?
And
oh wow,
they're quite superstitious, and they have a lot of interesting beliefs, and certainly believe in things like past lives and
you have to go and get baptize your dead, and
I
owning your own planet. And
people can do whatever they want to with the religion, but I wouldn't want to be involved in religion that does believe in talking to the dead but doesn't believe in drinking coffee. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, what a ripoff. But she when I saw her did something that I've seen her do lots of times in other readings. She used to be on Montel show, and she would very frequently say, get your thyroid checked, which is a thyroid disease is extremely common, especially amongst women. And you do often see more women than men attending these kinds of events. And she certainly did that when I was there. And it was very interesting. She had a line of people, a kind of cattle call of people lined up, and she would just kind of give them a little nugget of information that would be coming to her from the spirits at that time. And that was just along the lines of what she would be saying to everyone: get this checked about your health, or this your grandfather's looking out for you, and that kind of thing. And
they had those. When people are standing out front, when they have the people coming up and go, what do you hope Sylvia talks to you about tonight, if you're so lucky to get to talk to her, and then they're taking notes for her.
Do we have the picture of Luke Patrick, if we can just show him quickly? We don't have too much time to really talk about him.
We can absolutely show Luke, but you remember, Karen, that when we saw Banachek, that he was doing a similar thing to that. That's also the pose our 6-year-old takes a lot when he's telling us off.
He does, yeah.
Sorry, who is this again? Sorry.
So this guy's name is Luke Patrick, and so he's one of those people I talked about who jumped onto the bandwagon of John Edward, but this was in Australia, and I saw him give a performance at what's called the Return Service League Club. It's kind of like a veterans club in Australia, and this was in a rural town, and he did exactly that, as Matt referred to, when we but it was because it was just a small audience of maybe about 100 people in contrast to hundreds of people. He greeted everyone personally as they were entering the building.
Did he already know their names?
No, he didn't.
No.
But he was just asking people, how are you, and who are you hoping to talk to tonight?
Nice.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
He, it was pretty much doing the same thing that they're all doing. And there were some kind of murmurs in the audience that people thought he was being. I could hear people at other tables saying, "Wow, he's crap. He's general and he's vague." And so I remember him saying at one point, addressing that and saying, look, if you watch Crossing Over with John Edward or one of these other TV shows, they edit everything so that you get rid of all of these boring bits, but I'm having to communicate with these spirits. And
that's absolutely true too, because John Edward, for example, was in Denver. It's drink time.
It is drink time. We can figure this out. So,
Kathleen,
my bartender's here. Sorry.
Tip your servers. Now, when John Edward, go ahead.
No, we're not doing any dirty jokes.
Let me see if I can.
Go ahead. Sorry,
they'll tell me, give me a message.
Come on, Matt.
So when John Edwards was in town, he actually had to film for about 6 hours to get enough stuff to fill the 20 minutes that he needed in his show. That's how many misses there were. So exactly what you're saying, Karen. Yeah.
And excuse me, I've seen these recordings before too, and you will sit there. Maybe I've sat in studios where you're going to have a psychic who comes in and talks to a talk show host or something like that, and they will film for about half an hour for just maybe a 5-minute segment. So absolutely, they do edit out all of the boring bits, but I think that's a good excuse too, if you're just not terribly good at cold reading, to say, oh, well, don't expect too much because, this is not TV, this is live, and I'm having to do all the hard work in front of you.
Well, this is a really good point, because the shows that they have often, they're very heavily edited and everything else. So, when you got Teresa Caputo, we got John Edward, all these people, their shows are very edited. But you get someone like James Von Prague, who comes onto a TV show, a talk show, and then suddenly has to read the studio audience. Things go a little differently. Do you mind if I play a little clip of James Von Prague just mining for gold?
I do not mind.
Okay, because this is to me a very fun one.
Jean-Claude Van Damme to Von Prague, but whatever.
So let me know if you guys have any trouble hearing this or seeing it.
Here we go.
And I feel some arthritis, by the way. There's a lot of arthritis, and there's a bone problem. There's also something with the back. So I don't know if she sees us sitting have a pillow with the back of her, or is that you?
No.
No, that doesn't make sense to you. Okay, and what about trouble with legs?
No.
Okay, who has trouble with the legs now?
Well, my father's had 2 hip replacements.
2 hip replacements. He cannot walk as well as he used to.
Oh no, he walks very well.
Okay. Right. Was your mother buried?
Yes.
Because she's talking about being buried and about an wake, or a funeral rather, and she knows about it. She was very surprised by it all. And who's Kathy or Kathy? Is there Catherine or Kathy? Catherine or Kathy? Oh, she's talking about that.
Kate.
You know about this name?
Well, Kate.
Katie. Who's that?
I have a cousin now that's just
passing
surgery.
Right now?
Come with me today, but she just had to have surgery.
Let's talk about her, and she's praying with her, okay? I also know who's Catholic, but there's someone who's Catholic background. And
yeah, we all are.
You all are, okay.
Yeah.
So there was a mass said for her, and she wants to thank you for a mass that was said, and there are prayer cards that are said. There's a picture of Mother Mary somewhere around. Picture of Mother Mary. Would you know about this? You know about this. Picture
Well,
of Mother
all
Mary.
Catholics have
There's
Mother
a
Mary
guy
name somewhere.
on a cross.
Good, okay, well, I
sort of, getting a J.
So, I want to talk about something else with you, though. I said, music. I don't know why about music. Did you not do music? Were you going to do music when you were younger and you stopped doing music?
No.
Okay, you never wanted to play the piano?
No.
Okay. I also want to ask, I don't know if it's Teresa or Terry, but I am. Okay, I got to tell you that.
Sorry, what did you say?
Teresa or Terry?
Teresa?
Teresa or Terry. And was there a divorce with you?
Wait, Terry
Never,
Bull.
you never
You're
married?
doing Terry Bull.
Okay, I'm not surprised. I also want to tell you that he's sitting right next to you on the, I don't know if you call it the couch. Do you call it the couch or the settee? But he's sitting there with you. Did he smoke cigarettes, did he? No, who's smoking the cigarettes? Are you smoking the cigarettes?
Yes.
Would you please stop? Because he's there in the settee with you smoking the cigarettes. He's serving me cigarettes, okay?
From the settee? Are you
I don't
from
know
the
who Paul is,
suburbs?
or Paulie, or Paula. The name Paul. You
We say
understand that?
lounge.
Paula.
Yes, who is that, please?
Friends.
Okay, he wants to say hello or thank you to them because they helped when he died. They were there, they were here, they were around.
Today?
You don't know that.
James Van Prague. Please thank James Van Prague for prompting some interesting questions.
Thank you.
Oh my
Wow.
God, that was painful, and I'm starting to sweat. That was just so bad.
That made me
It was
feel
really uncomfortable.
We were feeling really bad for the psychic. Oh, bless his heart.
I know. Well, did you hear the part? I mean, you start to get sympathy for him, and then he says something like, "Are you divorced? Or you never been married?" I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
For him to say something like, it's like, oh,
bitchy
sympathy's out the
there.
door.
Yeah, and he was
So-
talking about settee or couch or whatever. Yeah, we say lounge. But yeah,
Lounge.
that was.
But he
filmed
didn't
in
know that
Australia.
because the spirit that was talking to him obviously wasn't from Australia.
Well, the problem is that when
he couldn't understand the accent.
and the
Yeah,
spirits
lounge,
go the
settee.
other way down
That's
the
easy.
drain. That's the other part. It's like,
But I think it's interesting too, where he was talking about people, Kate, your cousin, and all these distant relatives, and that's another thing with Luke Patrick. He actually stated that I received, after I purchased my ticket, I received a kind of list of do's and don'ts before turning up to his performance. And one of the do's was to bring along a family tree or to write down your extended family tree. So again, what they're trying to do is to make you make those connections. And
you're
you know,
gonna go back
so
and check it, right? Like, it's like,
but
you're
then
gonna,
at the
Tony,
same,
check your trees, everyone. You may have a Tony you don't know about,
somewhere,
right?
but at the same time, they're saying only the people who need to be read will be read, and then they do these really trivial readings about a distant relative.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it's astonishing how all this happens. Now, did you want to talk about one of the new fresh faces in?
Well, yeah, I mean, we want to talk a little bit more about James Van Prague.
Yeah.
But I guess
we went and saw him in Greeley, Colorado, and of course, it seems like a lot of these mediums want to inject as much comedy into things as they can, because James Van Prague was, my name is James Van Prague. I'm a small medium at large. And it's just like, everybody's got to make the medium joke.
He's got a set that he has to go through. So,
yes.
yeah.
And it was totally that. And a lot of the same things, there was this woman with a gruff voice, and he's like, and they're telling me that you need to stop smoking,
which we saw him just do in that.
Just
too.
now.
So they really do. Yeah, they really do have their little sayings and little references, and they recycle those again and again. And it doesn't take too much research to find that. And I mean, to me, they stick with what seems to work for them. Someone has a gruff sounding voice, then they're a smoker or a former smoker or someone they know is a smoker. I mean, you can really connect anything if you believe. You will link anything, no matter how absurd it is or irrelevant or trivial, if you believe. Now, but yeah, he was interesting. Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, he was really interesting to see. This was a number of years ago. I don't remember too much about it, but I think
I remember enough that I don't want to remember what I do remember. But anyway, the thing is before that, I guess it was around 2010, was working with a production company to come up with a TV show that we could pitch to the networks. And one of the shows that we had come up with is that I would go out and bust psychics, that's where that prove them to be frauds. And as the production company went to pitch this to networks, James Von Prague happened to be present at one of these, and he was like, "Oh, he and I can team up, and we'll go out together and we'll bust these frauds." And so it would have been me teamed up with James Von Prague, and when they came back, I said, "Sure, as long as in the finale I get to bust him." And so therefore the show did not happen, unfortunately, but
that is
it would have been
absolutely something I've heard a lot, though, to legitimize themselves. I've heard a lot of psychics and psychic mediums over the years who have talked about frauds
teaming up with a psychic or a skeptic, sure,
to separate themselves from other people, to really justify or just legitimize themselves and their supposed abilities, and to say, "Oh yes, absolutely, frauds exist. I'm not one of them." So that's a real technique.
Yeah.
Have you guys looked into Gary Spivey? Like the guy that wears the white wig, like one of the strangest psychic mediums I've ever seen. Like he wears the fakest looking white wig. It's like a white afro. It's really peculiar.
Well, I've seen it. I've seen that image in my mind when the dead were telling me about it. But what you're making me think of is Shirley Ghostman.
Well, I think Shirley Ghostman's
inspired
very
by
much
that.
riffing on Gary Spivey. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, because I've actually learned more about actual being able to perform the talking to the dead thing from Shirley Ghostman than I have anyone who.
Well, we should explain to our listeners who Shirley Ghostman is, because.
Well, talk about Gary Spivey first.
Gary Spivey has been around for decades, and he is like a James Van Prague, but he wears this peculiar wig. I should have told you whenever I think about psychics, he always pops in my mind because he doesn't look legit. Like he looks like he's a farce, or he's like, like he's a parody, but he's not. As near as I can tell, he's legitimately a psychic medium.
But you're making me think of Matt Fraser too. We'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah. I don't know if you could,
just really quickly, I'll share this so people can get an idea
of how serious. Exactly. Yes. No, he's distinctive.
Oh my God.
Gary Spivey is very distinctive. So
and this is okay.
Wow.
And this is not comedy.
And again, as far as I can tell, he's not comedy. He's
no, he's not comedy.
But
I don't think I'm really familiar with him.
There is no comedy there. I am not seeing any comedy.
I don't think it's a joke. I don't.
Okay, yeah, I'm not really familiar with him. Here I am saying, I've dealt with so many psychics and my psychic mediums. I'm not really familiar with him, but I guess you're looking up not Shirley Temple.
No, maybe next time. So Shirley Ghostman, I mean, when you got this is more of the kind of outfit that you can expect to see with Shirley Ghostman.
It feels very Gary Spivey inspired.
It really does. Yeah. It does. Yeah.
I think so. From seeing
and he is Mark Wooten, and he has several different characters that he plays, within this. He also plays this exorcist, with dark hair. That's in fact, I think this is him here. You can't really see it, but he's hilarious and does a beautiful job at this. And
La La Land was the show where
La La Land was brilliant.
Yeah, so he's this kind of British Cockney psychic medium who goes to LA and meets a number of people and does readings, and he I think found fame doing a reading supposedly with Princess Diana, the late Diana Spencer, and
and he channels her. And he's like, I'm Lady Di. What died? And it's just the worst ever.
Well, yeah, giving her this strong Cockney accent, and But that's another interesting area. I mean, that is something that's not really common in the realm of psychic mediums to do channeling. I mean, that is really something else. So perhaps we can do another episode where we talk about channelers. But that is good fun. I thought you were actually going to find a clip of Shirley Ghostman and
well, I'd thought about it, but I didn't want it to spoil the clip of me doing some psychic mediumship, because, like I said, I learned a lot of what I do from Shirley Ghostman, and I think it my fails came off way better than James Von Prague's, is all I can say. So
do you want to go into that then?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share me doing a short reading, because it's tells it all. I am getting some feelings here tonight. You know, like right over in this area, I'm getting someone. Does someone over here had someone die that begins with a C name? Could be Clara. Could be Chris. Okay. Let me come down here. Okay. It was Chrissy, you said? Christy. That's what they said. Yeah. Okay. They do want to let you know that you know they're okay on the other side. Now. Are you? She's trying to tell me. She sounds kind of wheezy. How did she die?
Cancer.
Of?
Infection from the chemotherapy.
Infection from the chemotherapy. Wow. Yeah, that's what she was saying, and it was a little hard to understand exactly. But yeah, she wants you to know that even though you've got some reservations about your transportation. Are you having car trouble or something? Or are you worried about something with your vehicle? Or
no.
She says don't. She says that's good. Don't worry. It's gonna be
good save.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. Pretty impressive. So yeah.
I think you really showed some moves there that they do display, where if they get a no, that they turn that around somehow to make it seem like it is actually a yes. That's a really good example of that.
It's interesting to me, like somehow things change. Like I before we started the show, I was talking with you guys about how like most of my experience, I've had a little bit of real life experience with people who profess to be psychic mediums, but most of my interest in this field has been with the sort of historical use of this stuff. And there was a time after the rise of spiritualism, especially after World War I, when there was a ton of interest in whether or not there was a legitimate scientific story. Like, is there really somehow this is happening? Like, are psychic powers real? Scientific American had a contest where they basically were paying people. They would pay for proof of psychic powers, very much like the James Randi Prize.
Right.
And not only were there inquiries into whether this was real scientifically, but the psychics themselves were kind of like scrambling to win it. Like they really wanted to be the winner. Whereas with like the JREF and with Randy's Prize, it was really hard for him to get anybody who was in this business to submit their powers for evaluation scientifically. So it's like something changed.
Well,
like
you remember, remember what Sylvia Browne said when she was asked,
the kid's dead.
Why would she do it?
Or something different. What do you?
Well, she agreed, didn't she? She said that she would subject herself to the test, and then
she couldn't get a hold. She couldn't get a hold of James Randi. She
right,
said.
He's very difficult to find. Well, he is now,
and he had the Sylvia Browne clock.
Well, he might be easier now for her to get hold of, but I don't know if they're in the same place. But
didn't he have the Sylvia Browne clock where it was like it's been two years since Sylvia promised that she would undergo the challenge, and
but later she came back and said that she didn't want to do it because she just didn't need the money. She didn't need that $1 million. Well, what about giving it to charity or something? I mean,
well, and Rebecca Rosen has said something along those lines too. Oh, people have accused me of doing cold readings, and I'd say to that, well, I don't need to prove to the skeptics that I have these abilities. So they've always got an out. They've always got an excuse.
It's true though. She doesn't need to prove to skeptics because skeptics aren't paying her like her believers are. So why bother with skeptics, really? I mean, that's not a good business decision.
Oh yeah, and it's just astonishing too how many people, even in fields like psychology, do believe in psychic abilities and psychic medium abilities.
And I don't think
it's really common.
I mean, we've looked into it a lot, and we've read the literature, and we know that currently there's no
good proof.
There's no good proof that it's real. There's plenty of evidence that it's not, and yet. Even if you go to a psychic business, most of them have a little disclaimer saying for entertainment purposes only, right? So
yeah.
And it's yet at the same time, people sincerely believe in this stuff, and they spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to contact their loved ones. And it feels to me I'm very offended by it personally. This idea, it feels like grief vampires. I mean, it just feels like they're just sapping the vulnerable of cash. And so,
and certainly when you've lost relatives and loved ones, I think it becomes more acute. My father passed last year, and just to think that anyone could try and pull the wool over my eyes or try to manipulate me is really makes me very angry. But certainly I think that's one of the most pressing issues that we've dealt with over the years regarding skepticism. And I've heard people say, oh, well, it's not such a bad thing. They're giving people comfort and they're giving them a sense of hope and some closure, but it's not real. And I think our argument as skeptics is to talk about how memories are more important, the real memories that we have of these people, and to uphold those instead of these fake memories which are given to us by psychic mediums. And it's just never anything substantial anyway, as we've been discussing all of these really trivial, cheap little nuggets that could apply to anyone. It's never anything that's impressive, and if it is, then it's hot reading. It's too impressive.
Yeah, I hate the idea that people are taking advantage of the vulnerable, even if they're sincere. And I think I've run into psychics or professed psychic mediums who felt like they were sincerely they believe they have powers and they were trying to be helpful, right?
And that's usually the kind of reading the coffee leaves or tea leaves. Yes, kind of
exactly. These are typically not big businesses. They're not paying for sessions. No. This is just people you meet at the New Age bookstore. Right?
Yeah. Once you talk about Rebecca Rosen or talk about John Edward or Sylvia Brown, we're talking about people with their eyes wide open.
Yeah.
As we referenced in the last episode. These are people who are making money, and they've been doing it for a long time. They know exactly what to say, how to say it, and it can seem very impressive, especially if it's an edited thing or it can come across as very real to those who believe.
I'm sure, like all of you, every now and then you do feel like you're getting messages. I feel like I'm getting one right now from the other side, and
the other side.
If you're in the audience and this means something to you, it says, please support us at patreon.com/monster talk. I don't know. Does that mean anything to you guys?
I was getting the same message.
Receiving that message
same
too.
message. Yeah.
Please like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Yeah. Yes. This is so weird. I feel like something really special is happening right now.
Yeah, even between the three of us, there's this kind of trinity, and we're all receiving this message at the same time. And
this cannot be an accident, right?
Yeah, I was hearing send cash directly to Matt Baxter, but I don't know what that one was about.
Wow.
It is an absolutely bizarre thing that we can fall prey to it so easily. There was a meetup group, because I used to go to the skeptics meetup groups all the time and everything. I saw one that was for mad scientists. And I thought, ooh, that would be fun. These are guys that just love to make these crazy inventions. And they all are, engineers with, all kinds of degrees and everything. All alcoholics and everything. But it was great. Went over to this guy's house, and huge house, because obviously he had made a lot of money. But they were showing me the Doc Brown style guitar amplifiers. And it was just, they had so many great creations that they had come up with. And as soon as they found out what I did, they immediately wanted to know, how do psychic mediums talk to the dead? I mean, they were all completely invested that it was real.
Oh man!
And so your level of intelligence has nothing to do with your beliefs, and
exactly.
it's amazing.
Right.
It is amazing because a lot of times skeptics get on a high horse about people are dumb if they believe. No, that's not the case at all.
No,
you can
we're
just
human.
come
We're
from
human.
a set of circumstances.
Well, Matt, I'm going to get you to share the Richard Dawkins story.
What, the one about homeopathy, or the one about? Richard Dawkins told me, he was like, "You're a paranormal investigator." When I first told him that, he was like, "Ew," because he's like, "Oh, you a conjurer?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a paranormal investigator." He's like, "Ew." So obviously he held magicians in a much higher regard, because I think he thought I believed in what I do.
Ghostbusters,
But after a while, he realized that I was a skeptical, scientific-based paranormal investigator, and he was like, "How do you do it?" He's like, "I'm far too gullible. I couldn't do that. What you do."
How's that?
That's a
Richard
very
Dawkins?
bizarre statement from Richard Dawkins. And then there was, and he's holding this sort of the dinner, and there was a woman there that was like, skeptical about everything except for homeopathy. She believed in that 100%. And I was like, "Richard, please help me explain to her." And he's like, I don't know anything about it.
They're blind spots. I mean,
he could talk about atheism, but not about homeopathy. And that was really interesting.
Yeah, I found that a lot. I think over the years that, skeptics, of course, we have blind spots. We have areas that things that we want to believe in or do believe in based on our socialization, how we've been raised. It's an interesting thing to see, but certainly with atheists too, that they're very skeptical about God. But when it comes to other beliefs that we skeptics are skeptical about, they might have a kind of residual belief in, or just never have been have questioned, or they're not particularly critical thinkers about other areas. So yeah, it's just blind spots. We're human.
We are human. And as I like to say, I don't believe in much, but I believe in you. Yeah. Okay.
I believe in you too.
But I do. I believe in people and their ability to work together, accomplish much. So yeah.
Wow. On that note, I think we're about ready to go.
I think so, yeah.
At this point.
What should we talk about next time? Because you mentioned
we should get some monsters back. I think we need to do monsters. I don't know what monster topic, but we need to get a monster in here. So
sure.
Well, I was thinking, even related to this, on our way back to monsters, we could talk about exorcisms such as Bob Larson and the various other exorcists that are out there doing their thing.
And
even talk about the demons that they exorcise. Karen and I have been actually involved in these kinds of things, and I have actually done a few exorcisms myself.
Got some fun stories, about people like Bob Larson, but
that could lead us right back into some more really good vampires, and hopefully our vampires, monsters.
You said vampire. You're just deliberately trying to make my wife quit watching the show. That's what you're trying to do.
Well, if anyone wants to comment and to suggest a topic that they'd like, or to write to us and to suggest a topic, we're always happy to. We love hearing from people.
Yeah, we do accept email, but we certainly also accept direct messages through patreon.com/monster talk. So that's
indeed we do.
Well, I just wanted to say that, after I'm trying to buy Karen and I a little bit of time. And the reason I say that is because we'd like to take a trip up to Pikes Peak to do a little Bigfoot searching and be able to come back and do a live show. Well, they have a Bigfoot crossing sign. So that tells me that there's been enough. That they
what more do you need?
They put a sign up. So,
cool.
but it used to be the 5th most reported place of Bigfoot sightings in the U.S. So we'd like to go up there and take a look, and then come back and do a Monster Talk Live with our findings.
That sounds fun.
That would be fun.
You know what? I don't want to overcommit, but I need to go see the Bigfoot Museum here in Georgia. I really need to do that. So
there's motivation.
No, we got 4 weeks. What if between now and the next Monster Talk Live, I go to the Bigfoot Museum here in Georgia in Cherry Log, and I'll report back on that. You report back on Pikes Peak. I think that's a great idea. If you guys wrote
I'm
for
sure
it.
we can do something Bigfoot-ish.
Yeah.
And then report on that. I think that sounds
I know
good.
Kathleen's probably super excited to hear me talk about going anywhere.
Well, it will answer
Sounds good.
an
But is he coming
age-old
back?
question.
It's like-
An age-old question. Does Bigfoot wear a COVID mask?
It's a good question. It is a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
So
And we need to know. So
Yep. Let's find out. Well, okay, something Bigfoot related then.
yes,
For
we're going
the
to make a
next
big
month.
impression. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the next D based on a
Cut.
true story that we'll be releasing is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That should be coming
Yeah.
out anytime now. So
That's
outstanding.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes.
This is so much fun. I really love doing these live shows. They've definitely got a different feel to everything else that we do, and lots of embarrassment.
Yes. So, and I want to say special thanks to I'm not getting the full name, but to there's an S. I don't know if that means
I'm getting a G-R.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Christine,
It's fine.
Christi-
You guys
Carl.
have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, and yeah, have a day wherever, depending
Or
on
day
wherever
as it may
is. Yeah.
be. That's right.
Yes.
Exactly. So,
Have a good one. We'll see you next month, and lots of other stuff coming up in the interim.
yes, we have
Okay.
things.
Talk to you guys soon. Good night.
See you on the other side.